I stood at my wedding rehearsal dinner watching my brother Derek charm the bridesmaids while our parents beamed with pride. 3 months ago, I discovered Derek had been sleeping with my ex-fiancée Sarah for 6 months before our breakup. When I confronted my parents about uninviting Derek, they threatened to boycott the wedding and cut off financial support for my new business venture. Now, as Derek raised a toast about brotherhood and loyalty, I spotted my mysterious guest arriving early at the hotel entrance, Aunt Margaret, the family outcast, who disappeared 15 years ago under scandalous circumstances my parents refused to discuss. The crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the hotel's marble lobby as I excused myself from Derek's performance and walked toward the entrance. My heart pounded against my ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. There she stood, Aunt Margaret, but not the broken, defeated woman I remembered from my 13th birthday party. This Margaret wore a tailored navy blazer, her silver hair styled in an elegant bob, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had rebuilt their entire existence from ashes. "Brad," she said, extending manicured hands that bore no resemblance to the trembling fingers I recalled. "You look exactly like your grandfather did at your age." The comparison hit me unexpectedly. Grandpa Joe had died when I was 16, taking with him the only stories about Margaret's sudden disappearance. My parents had forbidden any mention of her name, claiming she had betrayed the family trust and caused irreparable damage to our reputation. "I can't believe you came," I whispered, glancing nervously toward the rehearsal dinner, where Derek continued entertaining guests with fabricated tales of our childhood adventures. "Mom and Dad are going to lose their minds." Margaret's laugh held notes of genuine warmth mixed with steel. "They already lost those years ago, sweetheart. I'm here to help you find yours." I led her toward a quiet corner near the hotel bar, my mind racing with questions that had haunted me since childhood. Jessica appeared beside us, her wedding dress hanging in a garment bag over her arm, radiating the kind of nervous energy that comes with marrying into a family you're still trying to understand. "This must be the infamous Aunt Margaret," Jessica said, offering her hand with the straightforward manner that first attracted me to her. "I'm Jessica. I've heard absolutely nothing about you, which tells me everything I need to know about this family's communication style." Margaret's eyes crinkled with appreciation. "Smart woman. You're going to need that intelligence tomorrow." As we settled into leather chairs away from the main crowd, Margaret pulled out her phone with deliberate movements. "Before we go any further, you need to understand why I disappeared and what your parents have been hiding from you for the past 15 years. The photos she showed me made my stomach plummet toward the hotel's foundation. Construction sites with gaping holes where foundations should be solid. Families standing in front of houses with cracked walls and sagging roofs. Official-looking documents with signatures I recognized as my father's handwriting. I worked as the office manager for your father's construction company back then." Margaret explained, her voice carrying the weight of old wounds. "These are the families whose lives your parents destroyed with substandard materials and falsified safety inspections." The images blurred as my hands shook. The Patterson family had lost their life savings when their home's foundation crumbled 18 months after construction. Mr. Patterson's elderly father suffered a fatal heart attack from the stress of fighting insurance companies and lawyers. The Morrison family lived in a motel for 8 months while battling to prove their house was uninhabitable due to structural defects. I tried to blow the whistle. Margaret continued sliding the phone back into her purse. "I documented everything, made copies of falsified inspection reports, photographed the shoddy workmanship. Your father fired me, your mother led a campaign to ostracize me from every family gathering, and they spread rumors that I was mentally unstable and stealing from the company." Jessica leaned forward, her journalism background evident in her focused attention. "What happened to the families? Did they ever get justice?" 3 families lost everything. 2 more suffered significant financial damage. None of them ever received proper compensation. Margaret's jaw tightened with controlled anger. Your parents used the profits from that fraud to buy the house in Riverside Estates and fund Derek's private school education. The pieces of my childhood suddenly rearranged themselves into a sickening new picture. We had moved to that expensive neighborhood when I was 13, right after Margaret's disappearance. Dad claimed business was booming, but I remembered hushed phone conversations and Mom crying behind closed bedroom doors. "Where have you been all these years?" I asked, needing to understand how she had transformed from family pariah to this composed, successful woman. Seattle. I became a forensic accountant specializing in construction fraud cases. Turns out my experience with your father's business gave me unique insights that other investigators valued. Margaret's smile held no bitterness, only hard-earned wisdom. "I've helped dozens of families recover money from crooked contractors. It doesn't fix everything, but it helps." From across the lobby, Derek's laughter echoed off the marble walls as he regaled wedding guests with another fictional story about protecting me during childhood fights that never happened. My parents flanked him like proud peacocks, soaking up compliments about their wonderful sons and an perfect family. Margaret followed my gaze and nodded knowingly. They've built their entire identity around maintaining that perfect facade. But foundations built on lies always crack eventually. "What do you mean?" Jessica asked, though her expression suggested she already suspected the answer. "I'm not here just for a family reunion," Margaret said, standing and smoothing her blazer. "Tomorrow before the ceremony, your parents are going to face the consequences of their choices, and Derek is going to learn that actions have prices he never expected to pay." She moved toward the rehearsal dinner with purposeful strides, leaving Jessica and me staring at each other in stunned silence. Through the restaurant's glass doors, I watched Margaret approach my parents' table. Dad's face turned ashen when he recognized her. Mom's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Margaret leaned down and spoke quietly to them, her words inaudible, but her message crystal clear from their reactions. Dad gripped the table edge until his knuckles went white. Mom's social smile cracked like cheap paint. "We need to talk tomorrow before the ceremony," Margaret said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "There are some old debts that need settling." As she walked away, leaving my parents scrambling to maintain their composure in front of wedding guests, I realized that tomorrow's ceremony was going to be unlike anything anyone expected. The Colorado sunrise painted the Rocky Mountains in shades of pink and gold, but the beauty felt hollow as I stood on our hotel suite's balcony, watching the city wake up below. My wedding day had arrived, but instead of excitement, dread filled my chest like concrete setting around my lungs. Jessica emerged from the bathroom, her hair in curlers, clutching her laptop with the intensity of someone who had discovered something terrible. "Brad, we need to talk, now." She opened her laptop on the unmade bed, revealing our online banking interface. Red numbers glared from the screen like accusatory eyes. I was paying the final vendor invoices this morning and found discrepancies in our joint account. $15,000 is missing from transfers that supposedly went to Derek for loans you never told me about. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering against the tile floor. What loans? I never authorized any transfers to Derek. Jessica's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up bank statements and transfer receipts. Each document bore my forged signature, close enough to fool casual inspection, but clearly fake when examined closely. "Look at these dates. The transfers happened while you were in Chicago for the Morrison Industries conference last month." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Derek hadn't just destroyed my relationship with Sarah. He had been systematically stealing from my future with Jessica. I grabbed my phone and called Derek's number, my hands shaking with rage. "Morning, brother," Derek answered with nauseating cheerfulness. "Ready for the big day." "Where's my $15,000, Derek?" The silence stretched long enough for me to hear traffic sounds in the background. Derek was already out somewhere this early, probably avoiding this exact conversation. "I can explain everything." he finally said, his voice shifting to the manipulative tone he had perfected since childhood. I'm in a temporary situation that got out of hand. I just need a few more weeks to. Forging my signature is identity theft and fraud? I interrupted Jessica, nodding grimly beside me. You're going to replace every penny today, or I'm calling the police. Derek's mask slipped completely. You wouldn't do that to family? Besides, you owe me after all the times I covered for you when we were kids? Name one time, I challenged. Give me one specific example of you protecting me from anything. Another long pause. Look, I'm dealing with some serious people here, Brad. $40,000 in gambling debts doesn't just disappear. These guys don't negotiate payment plans. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Derek had stolen from me to pay gambling debts, and now he was trying to make it sound like my problem. You have a gambling addiction, and you stole from me to fund it. That's not my responsibility to fix. If you don't help me, I'll make sure your perfect wedding becomes a disaster, Derek threatened. I know things about this family that would destroy everything Mom and Dad have built. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at the phone like it had bitten me. Jessica closed the laptop and took my hands in hers. Whatever he's threatening, we'll face it together? But we're not giving him another penny. A sharp knock interrupted us. Brad, it's Margaret. I need to speak with you both immediately. I opened the door to find Margaret dressed in a crisp white blouse and black slacks, carrying a leather portfolio that looked ominous in her steady hands. Your parents agreed to meet with me in the hotel restaurant. What I'm about to show them will change everything, and you deserve to understand what's coming. We followed her downstairs to the restaurant where Mom and Dad sat at a corner table, looking like defendants awaiting sentencing. Dad's usual confident demeanor had evaporated, replaced by the nervous energy of someone whose secrets were closing in. Mom clutched her coffee cup with white knuckles, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the stress lines around her eyes. Margaret slid into the booth across from them, opening her portfolio with business-like efficiency. Jessica and I took seats at an adjacent table, close enough to observe, but far enough away to avoid immediate confrontation. Robert, Linda. Margaret began spreading photographs across the table like evidence in a courtroom. Meet the Hendricks family. Their foundation cracked 6 months after you completed their house in 2008. They lost their life savings in repairs and legal fees. Dad tried to interrupt, but Margaret continued relentlessly. The Gonzalez family. Their roof leaked from day one because you used substandard materials and skipped proper waterproofing. Mrs. Gonzalez's diabetes complications worsened from the mold exposure. Each photograph showed a different family, a different house, a different life, ruined by my father's greed. Mom's face grew paler with each image while Dad's jaw clenched tighter. And this, Margaret said, placing a final photograph on the table, is Thomas Patterson. He died of a heart attack while fighting to prove his house was uninhabitable. His grandson started college this year using money from a part-time job because the family's education savings went to temporary housing and lawyer fees. That's enough, Dad said, his voice rough with strain. Those projects were completed according to specifications. If there were problems afterward, that's not our responsibility. Margaret smiled coldly and placed a thick folder beside the photographs. These are copies of the original specifications you submitted to the city, alongside photos of the actual construction work. Notice how the foundation depth is 6 inches shallower than approved plans. See how the electrical work doesn't match the diagrams. Every shortcut is documented. Mom finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? Justice, Margaret replied simply. I've been in contact with an investigative journalist at the Denver Post who specializes in construction fraud. She's very interested in how a small contractor suddenly afforded a $600,000 house and private school tuition right after completing these problematic projects. Dad leaned forward aggressively. You can't prove anything illegal happened. Business was good in those years. Actually, I can. Margaret opened her phone and played an audio recording. Dad's voice filled the air clear and unmistakable. Just make sure the inspection passes. If Henderson asks questions about the foundation depth, remind him about the consulting fee we discussed. The families don't know enough about construction to notice the differences. The recording continued for 30 seconds, detailing bribes to inspectors and deliberate material substitutions. Mom looked like she might faint. Dad sat frozen, realizing his own words had condemned him. I have 12 hours of similar recordings, Margaret said, closing the phone. Plus financial records showing unusual cash payments to city inspectors and suppliers. Your fraud isn't ancient history, Robert. It's well-documented evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy. You're trying to destroy our family. Mom accused, tears streaming down her cheeks. Brad's wedding day, of all times. How can you be so cruel? I'm trying to save Brad from inheriting the consequences of your choices, Margaret replied. These families deserve justice, and they deserve it before you pass your ill-gotten gains to the next generation. She stood up, gathering her materials. You have until after the wedding ceremony to decide how you want to handle this. You can come clean publicly and arrange restitution, or I can publish the story and let the legal system sort it out. Either way, the truth is coming out. As Margaret walked away, I watched my parents crumble under the weight of their exposed lies. Everything I thought I knew about our family's success was built on the suffering of innocent people. The money that paid for my college education, the house I grew up in, the lifestyle we enjoyed, all of it came from families whose lives were destroyed. Jessica squeezed my hand under the table. Whatever happens next, we'll face it honestly. That's the only way to build something real together. I nodded, but my mind was already racing toward an even more terrible realization. If Derek knew enough family secrets to threaten Mom and Dad, what else might he be hiding? And how far would he go to protect himself when everything started falling apart? The hotel lobby buzzed with pre-ceremony energy as guests gathered for photos and last-minute preparations. I stood near the concierge desk, adjusting my bow tie for the 100th time when commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. Through the revolving glass doors walked Sarah, my ex-fiancée, visibly pregnant and scanning the crowd with determined eyes. My groomsmen froze mid-conversation. Jessica's bridesmaids stopped their animated chatter about bouquet arrangements. Even the hotel staff seemed to sense the electricity crackling through the air as Sarah's heels clicked across the marble floor with military precision. She wore a flowing emerald dress that accentuated her pregnancy, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. 6 months ago, Sarah had been the woman I planned to marry. Now she looked like an avenging angel seeking justice for wrongs I was only beginning to understand. Derek emerged from the elevator bank resplendent in his groomsman tuxedo and stopped dead when he saw her. The color drained from his face like water from a broken dam. Sarah marched directly toward him, her voice carrying across the lobby with crystalline clarity. We need to talk, right now. Derek glanced around, desperately aware that dozens of wedding guests were watching the drama unfold. Sarah, this isn't the time or place. We can discuss whatever you need to discuss after. I'm 6 months pregnant with your child, she announced loud enough for everyone within 50 feet to hear. And you've been avoiding my calls for 3 weeks. The lobby fell silent except for the gentle hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. Guests exchanged shocked glances, whispered conversations, and pointed stares. Derek's carefully constructed facade cracked like ice in spring sunlight. That's impossible! Derek stammered, his usual smooth confidence replaced by panic. We were always careful. You can't be sure it's mine. Sarah's laugh held no humor, only bitter recognition of his cowardice. DNA doesn't lie, Derek, unlike you. She pulled out her phone and displayed a laboratory report. Prenatal paternity testing. 99.9% probability that you're the father. I watched from across the lobby, feeling like an observer at a car accident, horrified but unable to look away. This explained so much about Derek's recent behavior, his increased drinking, his desperate gambling, his theft from my account. He hadn't just betrayed me with Sarah. He had created a child and abandoned both mother and baby. Jessica appeared at my elbow, having rushed down from her bridal suite when someone told her about the disturbance. She wore her wedding robe over pajamas, her hair half-styled her face, a mixture of shock and growing anger. "Is that why they broke up?" she whispered. "Because she was pregnant with Derek's baby." Before I could answer, Derek tried a different approach with Sarah. He pulled out his wallet and began counting bills. "Look, I can help with medical expenses, just tell me what you need, and we can work something out privately." "I don't want your money," Sarah replied with dignity that made Derek's offer look even more pathetic. "I want you to acknowledge your child. I want you to take responsibility like a grown man instead of running away like a coward." Derek's desperation escalated into ugly territoriality. "You can't just show up here and ruin my brother's wedding with your accusations. This is supposed to be his special day." "His special day?" Sarah's voice rose with incredulous anger. "You destroyed his relationship with me while I was pregnant with your baby, and now you're worried about his special day." The truth hit me like a physical blow. Derek's affair with Sarah hadn't been casual betrayal, it had been calculated manipulation while she was vulnerable and pregnant. He had destroyed my relationship and abandoned his own child in one series of selfish choices. Margaret appeared beside Jessica and me, having witnessed the confrontation from across the lobby. "This changes everything," she murmured. "Derek's not just a gambling addict and a thief. He's a predator who targets vulnerable women." Mom and Dad emerged from the elevator dressed in their formal wedding attire, but looking like they were walking toward an execution. When they saw Sarah confronting Derek in front of wedding guests, Mom's composure finally shattered completely. "Get her out of here," Mom hissed at Dad. Her social smile replaced by naked desperation. "Pay her whatever she wants, but get her away from our guests." Dad approached Sarah with the entitled confidence of someone accustomed to buying his way out of problems. "Miss, I'm sure we can resolve this misunderstanding privately. Perhaps we could discuss compensation for your time and inconvenience." Sarah turned toward him with the cold precision of someone who had been underestimated once too often. "Compensation. Your son created a life and then abandoned it. You think that's worth a check and a confidentiality agreement?" "We don't know that baby is Derek's." Mom interjected, her voice shrill with panic. "DNA tests can be wrong. This could be an attempt to extort money from our family." The casual cruelty of Mom's accusation hung in the air like poison. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "I was faithful to Brad for 3 years. Derek seduced me when I was emotional about our relationship problems. He told me Brad didn't really love me and was planning to leave me anyway." Jessica grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. "He manipulated both of you. He destroyed your relationship so he could have her, then abandoned her when she needed support." Derek realized his parents' approach was making everything worse. He stepped between them and Sarah, his voice taking on the pleading tone he had used to manipulate me throughout childhood. "Sarah, please. We can discuss this privately after the ceremony. You're right that I've been avoiding your calls, but this isn't the way to handle it. Think about Brad and Jessica. They don't deserve to have their wedding ruined because of our situation." Their wedding. Sarah's composure finally cracked. "You ruined Brad's first engagement by lying to me about his feelings. You convinced me he was cheating when it was you pursuing me the whole time. You destroyed his trust in relationships and my ability to believe in love, all so you could have a few months of fun before abandoning me and your baby." The weight of Derek's systematic manipulation became clear. He hadn't just stolen my money or betrayed me with Sarah. He had orchestrated the destruction of my relationship through lies and emotional manipulation, then abandoned both Sarah and his child when the consequences became inconvenient. Margaret stepped forward, her voice cutting through the emotional chaos with professional authority. Derek, you have two choices. You can acknowledge your responsibility and work with Sarah to create a plan for supporting your child, or she can pursue legal action that will make today's scene look like a private conversation. Derek's mask slipped, completely revealing the angry, entitled man beneath the charming facade. You don't get to dictate terms to me, Margaret. You disappeared for 15 years, and now you think you can come back and destroy our family. I'm not destroying anything, Margaret replied calmly. I'm exposing what was already broken so it can be properly fixed. Derek looked around the lobby at the assembled wedding guests, his parents' horrified faces, Sarah's determined stance, and my growing understanding of his true nature. In that moment, he made the choice that would define everything that followed. Fine, he said, his voice turning vicious. You want the truth? Let's tell everyone the truth about this family. He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through files with the manic energy of someone who had decided to burn everything down rather than accept responsibility. Brad, you want to know why Mom and Dad always favored me? You want to know why they never treated us equally? Margaret's eyes widened with alarm. Derek, stop. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. Derek replied, his finger hovering over his phone screen. I'm tired of protecting everyone else's secrets while my life falls apart. The lobby had become completely silent wedding guests, forming an unconscious circle around the unfolding drama. Hotel security stood at the edges, uncertain whether to intervene in what appeared to be a family matter. Derek, I said, stepping forward with Jessica beside me. Whatever you're planning to say, think about the consequences for everyone involved. He looked at me with eyes full of resentment and pain. Consequences. Like the consequences of finding out your whole life is built on lies. Like learning your parents never really wanted you. Sarah moved closer to Derek, her anger replaced by genuine concern. Derek, you're in pain, and you're making choices that will hurt people who care about you. Stop before you do something you can't take back. For a moment, Derek's expression softened as he looked at Sarah's pregnant form. I saw a glimpse of the man he could have been, someone capable of love and responsibility. But then his phone buzzed with a text message, and his face hardened again. They found me, he whispered, staring at the screen. The people I owe money to. They're in the parking lot. Through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows, we could see three men in dark suits standing beside a black sedan, their attention focused on the hotel entrance. Derek's gambling debts had followed him to my wedding, bringing physical danger into an already volatile situation. This is what I get for trying to protect everyone, Derek said, his voice breaking with desperation. I kept family secrets, I cleaned up everyone's messes. And now I'm the one facing consequences, while the real criminals hide behind their perfect reputations. He raised his phone again, his thumb moving toward the screen. Maybe it's time everyone learned the truth about the perfect Patterson family. Margaret moved with surprising speed, grasping Derek's wrist before he could activate whatever digital destruction he had planned. Not here, not like this. If you want to expose family secrets, at least give Brad the courtesy of hearing them privately first. Derek struggled against her grip, his eyes wild with desperation and rage. Privacy. Like the privacy Mom and Dad gave me when they decided my entire existence should be a lie. The words hung in the air like a fuse burning toward dynamite. Wedding guests murmured among themselves, sensing that something far more significant than a family argument was unfolding before their eyes. Margaret's professional composure cracked slightly. Derek, you don't understand the full consequences of what you're about to do. There are innocent people who will be hurt by this revelation. Innocent people? Derek's laugh bordered on hysteria. Like Brad, who got to be the real son, while I've been the dirty secret for 28 years. Like Sarah, who I manipulated because I was so desperate to feel like I had some power in this family. Like my biological mother, who's been blackmailing Dad since before I was born. The admission dropped like a bomb into the lobby's tense atmosphere. Jessica grabbed my hand so tightly I could feel her pulse racing through her fingertips. Sarah stepped backward, her face pale with shock. Mom made a small choking sound, while Dad stood frozen like a statue carved from guilt and fear. "What are you talking about?" I managed to ask. Though part of me already suspected the answer would shatter everything I thought I knew about our family. Derek pulled free from Margaret's grasp and turned toward me with eyes full of pain and resentment. "Ask Dad about his affair 29 years ago. Ask him about Rebecca Martinez, his business partner's wife. Ask him about the night Thomas Martinez found them together and put a gun to his own head." The lobby seemed to tilt around me. Derek continued with the relentless precision of someone who had been carrying poisonous secrets for too long. "Dad got Rebecca pregnant. When Thomas found out about the affair, he killed himself rather than face the shame. Rebecca was left alone with a newborn baby and Thomas's legitimate children, who lost everything when his business collapsed without him." Sarah moved closer to Derek, her voice gentle despite the chaos. "Derek, how long have you known this?" "3 years," he replied, his anger deflating into exhausted sadness. "I needed medical records for a job application and found discrepancies in my birth certificate. Mom and Dad created an elaborate story about adopting me from a family friend, but they never told me the friend was Dad's pregnant mistress." Margaret's shoulders sagged with the weight of secrets she had apparently been carrying alone. "Derek, there's more to the story that you don't understand. More that affects everyone here. More—" Derek's voice cracked with bitter laughter. "What could be worse than learning your entire life is built on adultery, suicide, and cover-ups?" Margaret looked around the lobby at the assembled wedding guests, hotel staff, and family members. "This conversation needs to happen in private. There are people here who deserve to hear the truth, but not like this." Jessica stepped forward with the natural leadership that made her such an effective journalist. "Everyone who isn't immediate family needs to give us space. This is a private matter that affects personal safety and legal issues." Most guests moved toward the hotel restaurant or returned to their rooms, but several close family friends remained nearby, too invested in the drama to completely withdraw. Sarah stayed close to Derek, her protective instincts apparently stronger than her anger at his betrayal. Margaret gestured toward a small conference room off the main lobby. "Let's continue this where we can speak freely without an audience." As we moved toward the conference room, Derek's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, and his face went white. "They're coming inside, the guys I owe money to. They're not going to wait anymore." Through the lobby windows, I could see the 3 men from the parking lot walking toward the hotel entrance with purposeful strides. Derek's gambling debts had transformed from abstract problem to immediate physical threat. "How much do you owe them?" Jessica asked, her journalistic instincts kicking in despite the personal chaos. $40,000, Derek admitted. Plus interest and penalties. They don't negotiate payment plans and they don't accept excuses. Margaret pulled out her phone and dialed hotel security. "We need immediate assistance in the main lobby, potential threats from outside individuals seeking to collect private debts." As we entered the conference room, Derek collapsed into a chair and buried his face in his hands. "I've destroyed everything. Brad's wedding, Sarah's trust, my relationship with my child. And now I've brought dangerous people to threaten everyone I care about." Sarah sat beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder, despite everything he had done to hurt her. "Derek, you need to understand that your poor choices don't erase your responsibility to do better. But they also don't make you irredeemable." Margaret closed the conference room door and activated a privacy lock. "Before we address Derek's immediate problems, Brad deserves to know the complete truth about his family's history. She opened her portfolio and removed a different set of documents, birth certificates, DNA test results, and financial records spanning nearly 3 decades. Derek is correct that he's Robert's biological son through an affair with Rebecca Martinez. But there's another layer to this story that affects everyone in this room. She placed DNA test results on the conference table. I had these tests run after Derek contacted me 6 months ago, desperate to understand his parentage. Derek and Brad, you're both Robert's biological sons. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean Derek just said he was the product of an affair? He was, Margaret confirmed. But Rebecca Martinez isn't some random woman Robert had an affair with. She's your mother, Linda's younger sister. The room fell silent except for the sound of Derek's sharp intake of breath and Mom's muffled sob from where she had been standing near the door. Linda and Rebecca were sisters. Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret nodded grimly. Linda was married to Robert but struggling with infertility. Rebecca was married to Thomas Martinez, Robert's business partner, but their marriage was troubled. The affair began as emotional support during both couples' difficulties and evolved into something more destructive. The pieces of family dysfunction began clicking into place with horrible clarity. Mom's intense rivalry with Derek wasn't just favoritism, it was jealousy and resentment toward the child her sister had given her husband. When Rebecca became pregnant, Margaret continued, Thomas discovered the affair and confronted Robert. The guilt and shame drove Thomas to suicide, leaving Rebecca widowed with a newborn, and Thomas's other children suddenly orphaned and financially devastated. Derek looked up from his hands, tears streaming down his face. So I'm not just Dad's illegitimate son. I'm the product of an affair that destroyed a family and drove my stepfather to kill himself. Robert and Linda legally adopted you to cover up the scandal. Margaret explained. They created the fiction that you were the child of family friends who died in an accident. Rebecca was paid to relocate and maintain the secret, but the guilt and trauma drove her to drink and eventually to blackmail. Mom finally spoke from her position near the door. Rebecca has been demanding money for 28 years. Every time we thought we were free, she would threaten to expose everything. The construction fraud started as a way to generate enough cash to pay her off permanently. But it didn't work, Margaret continued. Rebecca's demands escalated and she began threatening to contact Derek directly when he turned 18. Robert's construction fraud was discovered, which led to my investigation and eventual exile from the family. Derek stood up abruptly, pacing toward the window, overlooking the parking lot. So my existence has been destroying this family since before I was born. My biological mother is a blackmailer, my stepfather killed himself because of my conception, and my adoptive mother resents every breath I take. Sarah moved toward him, her voice firm but compassionate. Derek, you didn't choose any of this. You're not responsible for the adults' choices that created this situation. But I am responsible for my choices as an adult, Derek replied, turning back toward the room. I knew about the family dysfunction, and instead of seeking help or demanding honesty, I chose to become part of the problem. I manipulated Sarah, stole from Brad, and brought dangerous people into our lives. Margaret gathered her documents, her expression mixing professional determination with personal sadness. The immediate question is how to handle the current crisis. Derek's gambling debts, Sarah's pregnancy, and the construction fraud investigation all require immediate attention. Through the conference room windows, we could see hotel security escorting the 3 men from Derek's gambling debts out of the lobby. The immediate physical threat was contained, but the emotional and legal consequences were just beginning. Derek, I said, standing to face my brother, my half-brother, directly. You've made terrible choices, but you're still family. Not because of blood or legal documents, but because you're choosing to face the truth and take responsibility. Derek's expression shifted from despair towards something resembling hope. After everything I've done to hurt you, why would you want to help me? Because that's what families do, Jessica interjected. Real families support each other through consequences and help each other become better people. Margaret smiled for the first time since arriving at the hotel. That's the most mature response to family dysfunction I've heard in 30 years of investigating fraud cases. Derek looked around the room at the assembled faces: his biological father, his legal mother, his half-brother, his ex-lover carrying his child, and the aunt who had been exiled for telling the truth. What happens now? Margaret reopened her portfolio. Now we stop protecting lies and start creating solutions. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but it's the only way to build something honest and lasting. She placed a final document on the table, a legal agreement she had apparently prepared in advance. This is a comprehensive plan for addressing the construction fraud, Derek's gambling debts, and Rebecca's blackmail. It requires complete financial transparency, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and ongoing therapy for everyone involved. Derek picked up the document, reading through its detailed requirements. This would expose everything publicly. Our reputation, Dad's business, everything would be destroyed. Reputations built on lies deserve to be destroyed, Margaret replied simply. What matters is building something authentic in their place. Mom stepped forward, her voice stronger than it had been all day. If we do this, if we tell the complete truth, what happens to our family? What happens to the wedding? What happens to Brad and Jessica's future? Margaret looked toward Jessica and me. That depends entirely on what kind of future they want to build together. Derek stared at the legal document in his hands, his face cycling through emotions like a broken kaleidoscope. Anger, fear, desperation, and something that might have been relief battled for control of his expression. When he finally looked up, his eyes held a dangerous glitter that made everyone in the conference room take an unconscious step backward. You want to know the real truth? Derek said, his voice carrying a cold amusement that raised the hair on my arms. You think Margaret's investigation uncovered everything? You think those DNA tests and construction fraud documents tell the complete story? Margaret's professional composure faltered slightly. Derek, what are you talking about? Derek's laugh held no warmth, only bitter recognition of how thoroughly he had fooled everyone around him. I've known about my parentage for 3 years. Not just known, I've been actively investigating it, documenting it, and planning how to use it. He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through files with practiced efficiency. Rebecca Martinez, my biological mother, didn't just blackmail Dad randomly. I've been feeding her information about family finances and business dealings for 18 months. The admission hit the room like a physical blow. Sarah moved away from Derek, her hand protectively covering her pregnant belly. Derek, what are you saying? I'm saying I haven't been Dad's victim, Derek replied, his mask of charm finally completely gone. I've been his partner in crime and now his competitor. He turned his phone screen toward us, displaying bank records and recorded phone conversations. Every gambling debt, every desperate theft from Brad's account, every manipulation of Sarah, it was all calculated. I wanted to destroy this family's perfect facade while positioning myself to take control of whatever remained. Margaret grabbed for the phone, but Derek pulled it away. The affair with Sarah wasn't accidental attraction. I specifically targeted her because she was vulnerable after her father's death, and because she represented everything Brad valued. I wanted to prove that I could take anything he had. My hands clenched into fists as the full scope of Derek's betrayal became clear. You destroyed my relationship with someone you didn't even love. Love. Derek's voice dripped with contempt. Brad, you've never had to fight for anything in your life. You were the legitimate son, the one who got college paid for the one who got family support for starting a business. I got adopted as damage control and treated like a shameful secret. Sarah's voice cut through Derek's justifications with surgical precision. So you decided to create more damage. You decided to hurt innocent people because you were hurt. Derek turned toward her, his expression shifting between manipulation and genuine vulnerability. Sarah, you have to understand the position I was in. Rebecca has been demanding $50,000 to disappear permanently. Dad's been paying her smaller amounts for years, but she escalated her threats when she learned I was getting married. You're not getting married, Jessica pointed out. You've destroyed every relationship you've had through lies and manipulation. I was planning to propose to Sarah. Derek continued, ignoring Jessica's observation. The baby was going to be my way of forcing myself into legitimacy. A grandchild that would require family acceptance and financial support. The cold calculation behind Derek's choices left everyone speechless. He had orchestrated Sarah's pregnancy as part of a long-term strategy to gain leverage over the family. Margaret found her voice first. Derek, you're describing criminal conspiracy and fraud. If you've been working with Rebecca to extort money from your family, you've committed serious felonies. Derek's phone buzzed with another message. He glanced at the screen and his confident facade cracked slightly. Rebecca wants to meet tonight. She's threatening to contact Brad directly and tell him about the biological relationship unless I deliver $50,000. Let her, I said, surprising everyone in the room, including myself. Let her tell me whatever truth she thinks will destroy my life. I'm tired of family secrets having power over us. Derek stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Brad, you don't understand the implications. If Rebecca goes public with the family history, your business reputation will be destroyed. Nobody wants to work with the son of a criminal contractor. Then I'll build a different business. I replied, feeling a strange sense of freedom in accepting the worst-case scenario. I'll build something honest that doesn't depend on covering up other people's crimes. Derek's phone continued buzzing with increasingly urgent messages. He scrolled through them, his face growing paler with each notification. This isn't just about Rebecca anymore. The people I owe gambling debts to have contacted her. They know about the blackmail money, and they want their cut. Margaret leaned forward, her investigative instincts sharpening. What exactly are you saying? Rebecca's been using my gambling situation to increase her leverage against Dad. Derek explained, his voice taking on a panicked edge. She told my creditors that the family has been paying her thousands of dollars for years. Now they think we're sitting on a pile of cash and refusing to pay Derek's debts. Sarah stood up abruptly, her maternal instincts overriding her anger. Derek, you've put our unborn child in danger. These people you owe money to, they're threatening our baby's safety. Derek's confident mask finally shattered completely. I never meant for it to get this complicated. I just wanted to level the playing field. I wanted to matter as much as Brad matters. You always mattered, Mom said from her position near the door, her voice thick with tears. You mattered so much that we built our entire lives around protecting you from the truth about your origins. Protecting me. Derek's voice rose with incredulous anger. You protected yourselves. You protected your reputation and your marriage. I was just collateral damage that needed to be managed. Dad finally spoke, his voice heavy with decades of accumulated guilt. Derek, you're right that we handled your adoption poorly. We were young, scared, and dealing with trauma we didn't understand. But that doesn't justify the choices you've made as an adult. Derek turned toward his biological father with eyes full of resentment. You created me through betrayal and adultery. You drove Thomas Martinez to suicide. You built your business success on fraud. And now you want to lecture me about making good choices? Yes, Dad replied simply. Because someone has to break the cycle of poor choices that has defined this family for too long. Derek's phone rang, displaying Rebecca's contact information. He stared at the screen for several seconds before declining the call. She's going to expose everything anyway. Whether I pay her or not, whether I cooperate or not, she's going to destroy what's left of this family's reputation. Margaret took the phone from Derek's unresisting fingers. Then let's control how the information comes out. Let's tell the truth ourselves before someone else tells lies about us. Derek looked around the conference room at the faces of people he had manipulated, betrayed, and endangered. For the first time since I had known him, he appeared to see the consequences of his actions clearly. "I'm 28 years old," he said quietly. "Half my life has been spent resenting Brad for having what I thought I deserved, and the other half has been spent trying to take it away from him. I don't know how to be anything other than angry and manipulative." Sarah moved back toward him, her voice gentle but firm. "Derek, you can learn. People change when they decide to do the hard work of becoming better. But you have to choose to change, and you have to accept help." Derek's phone buzzed with a text message from Rebecca. "1 hour. Bring the money, or I'm calling Brad the police and the newspapers. This ends tonight." He showed the message to Margaret, who nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure it ends on our terms, not hers." Margaret opened her portfolio and removed a final document, a comprehensive plan that addressed not just the immediate crisis, but the long-term healing the family would need. "Derek, you have a choice," Margaret said. "You can continue trying to manipulate and control the situation, or you can surrender control and let people who care about you help you build something better." Derek stared at the document, then looked around the room at his family, biological, adoptive, chosen, and complicated. "If I agree to this plan, what happens to my child? What happens to Sarah? We become a family," Jessica said simply. "Not a perfect family, not a traditional family, but a family that faces problems together instead of creating more problems to avoid facing the original ones." Derek's shoulders sagged as the weight of his choices finally overwhelmed his ability to carry them alone. "I don't know how to trust people. I don't know how to accept help without looking for the angle or the cost." "You learn by practicing," Sarah said, placing her hand on his shoulder again. "One honest conversation at a time, one responsible choice at a time, one day at a time." Derek looked at his phone, then at the faces around him, then at the legal document outlining a path toward accountability and healing. "What if I'm too broken to change? What if the damage I've done can't be repaired?" Margaret smiled with the wisdom of someone who had rebuilt her life from similar wreckage. "Derek, the fact that you're asking that question means you're not too broken to change. Broken people don't worry about whether they can heal. They just keep breaking things." Derek took a deep breath and picked up a pen from the conference table. "If we're going to do this, if we're going to face everything honestly, then I need to start by taking responsibility for my choices." He began reading through the legal document, his expression shifting from resignation to something that might have been hope. "This plan requires me to enter gambling addiction treatment and make restitution for the money I stole." "Yes," Margaret confirmed. "And it requires ongoing family therapy for everyone involved, public acknowledgement of the construction fraud, and a structured plan for rebuilding relationships based on honesty." Derek signed his name at the bottom of the document, then looked up at the assembled faces. I'm scared of admitting how badly I've messed up, and I'm scared of trying to become someone better." "Being scared is normal," Jessica said. "Being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared." Derek's phone buzzed again with another message from Rebecca. This time, instead of looking panicked, he showed the message to Margaret. "What do we say to her?" Margaret smiled and began typing a response. "We tell her that the family has decided to come forward publicly with the complete truth, including her blackmail attempts. We offer her the choice to participate in resolution or face the consequences alone." As Margaret sent the message, Derek looked around the conference room one more time. Are we really going to make this work? Are we really going to become the kind of family that solves problems instead of creating them? "We're going to try," I said, extending my hand to my half-brother. "And if we fail, we'll try again. But we'll try honestly this time." Derek shook my hand, and for the first time in our lives, the gesture felt genuine rather than performative. "Brad, I'm sorry for everything. For Sarah, for the money, for the lies, for all of it. I know, I replied, and I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because forgiveness is the first step toward building something better. Margaret gathered her documents and stood up. Now comes the hard part. We have a wedding to finish, a family to heal, and a future to build. Everyone ready? Derek looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. He looked at his parents, who waited with nervous hope. He looked at Jessica and me, representing the future he wanted to be part of. I'm ready, he said. For the first time in my life, I'm ready to tell the truth and face the consequences. Standing in that hotel conference room surrounded by the wreckage of my family's lies and my brother's manipulation, I felt something shift inside me like tectonic plates, finding a new equilibrium. The Derek I thought I knew was gone, replaced by this broken, desperate man who had orchestrated years of betrayal. But instead of anger or despair, I felt an unexpected clarity about what needed to happen next. We're not canceling the wedding, I announced, causing everyone in the room to look at me with surprise. We're going to finish what we started, but we're going to do it honestly. Jessica moved beside me, her hand finding mine with the natural synchronization that had drawn us together in the first place. What do you mean? I mean, we're going to turn our wedding into something real, something that actually represents who we are and what we believe in, instead of perpetuating the same family dysfunction that created this mess. Margaret raised an eyebrow, her professional curiosity evident. Brad, what exactly are you proposing? I looked around the room, my mind organizing thoughts with a clarity I had never experienced before. Derek, your gambling debts are your responsibility, but we're going to help you handle them safely, not by paying them off and enabling more destructive behavior, but by connecting you with legitimate debt counseling and addiction treatment. Derek started to protest, but I held up my hand. You've been manipulating this family for years by making your problems into emergencies that everyone else had to solve. That stops today. Your choices, your consequences, your recovery. I turned toward my parents. Dad, the construction fraud victims deserve justice and restitution. Not hush money, not legal maneuvering, not more cover-ups, justice. We're going to contact every affected family and arrange proper compensation. Dad's face went pale. Brad, you don't understand the financial implications. Full restitution could mean losing the house, the business, everything we've built. Good, I replied without hesitation. Everything we built was constructed on other people's suffering. It deserves to be lost. Margaret smiled with genuine appreciation. Brad, that's exactly the approach needed to create real change. I looked at Sarah, who stood beside Derek with protective maternal instincts warring against justified anger. Sarah, you and your baby deserve support and stability, not from Derek's manipulation or my parents' guilt, but from a family commitment to doing better. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Brad, I don't expect anything from your family after everything that's happened. You're not expecting it, Jessica interjected. We're offering it. Because that's what families do when they choose to act with integrity instead of self-preservation. I walked to the conference room window, looking out at the hotel parking lot where Derek's creditors had been waiting earlier. Margaret, those construction fraud families you mentioned, can you contact them today? Several of them live in the Denver area, Margaret confirmed. Why? Because they deserve to hear acknowledgement and apology directly from Dad, not through lawyers or intermediaries. If they're willing to come to the hotel this afternoon, I want to arrange a meeting before the wedding ceremony. Dad stood up abruptly. Brad, you can't seriously expect me to face those families on your wedding day. The emotional strain, the legal implications, the emotional strain, Derek laughed bitterly. Dad, you've been causing them emotional strain for 15 years. You can handle a few hours of discomfort. Margaret pulled out her phone. I can reach the Patterson family, the Morrison family, and the Hendricks family within an hour. But Brad, are you sure you want to handle this today? I'm sure, I replied. feeling more certain than I had about anything in months. Jessica and I want our marriage to begin with truth and accountability, not with more family secrets that will poison our future. Jessica moved to the conference table and began writing on hotel stationery. I'm changing our wedding vows. Instead of traditional promises about love and honor, I want to make commitments about building authentic relationships and breaking destructive family patterns. Derek watched her writing with growing amazement. You're really going to marry into this dysfunction willingly? I'm marrying Brad, Jessica replied firmly. And I'm committing to helping build the kind of family that faces problems instead of hiding from them. Margaret began making phone calls reaching out to the construction fraud families with surprising efficiency. Within 30 minutes, she had arranged for representatives from 3 families to come to the hotel at 4 o'clock, 2 hours before the scheduled ceremony. Derek, I said, turning back toward my half-brother. You have a choice to make right now. You can be part of the solution, or you can continue being part of the problem. But you can't do both. Derek looked at Sarah, then at his phone, displaying increasingly urgent messages from Rebecca and his gambling creditors. What does being part of the solution look like? It means you stop manipulating and start taking responsibility, Sarah answered before I could speak. It means you get help for your gambling addiction, make restitution for the money you stole, and commit to being a real father to our child. Derek's phone rang again, Rebecca calling for the 3rd time in an hour. This time, instead of declining the call or answering with deception, Derek looked around the room and made a decision that surprised everyone. He answered the phone and put it on speaker. Rebecca, I'm here with my entire family. We're all going to hear whatever you have to say. Rebecca's voice filled the conference room with the harsh edge of someone accustomed to getting her way through intimidation. Derek, you were supposed to bring me $50,000. Instead, I hear you're having family meetings about exposing secrets. That's correct. Derek replied, his voice steadier than it had been all day. We've decided to stop paying blackmail and start facing consequences honestly. You little fool, Rebecca snarled. Do you have any idea what I'll do to your family's reputation? Your father's business will be destroyed. Your precious brother's wedding will become a scandal. Everyone you care about will suffer. Margaret leaned toward the phone. Rebecca, this is Margaret Patterson. I've been investigating Robert's construction fraud for 15 years. We already have documented evidence of everything you think you're threatening to expose. The silence on the other end of the call stretched for several seconds. When Rebecca spoke again, her voice had lost its confident edge. Margaret, I thought you were exiled from the family. I was. For trying to expose the same crimes you've been profiting from through blackmail. Margaret's voice carried professional authority mixed with personal satisfaction. The difference is I wanted justice for the victims. You wanted money for yourself. I deserve compensation for keeping this family's secrets, Rebecca protested. I've sacrificed my relationship with my grandson to protect their reputation. Derek's expression shifted as he processed the implications of Rebecca's words. You've never tried to have a relationship with me, Rebecca. You've only contacted me when you wanted money. I gave birth to you, Rebecca replied, desperation creeping into her voice. I gave up my marriage, my reputation, everything to protect you from scandal. Sarah moved closer to Derek, her maternal instincts triggered by the conversation. Rebecca, you gave up your integrity when you chose blackmail over honest communication. You chose money over relationships. Don't lecture me about integrity, Rebecca snapped. Your boyfriend has been gambling away thousands of dollars while planning to manipulate you into marriage and motherhood. You're right, Derek said quietly. I have been making terrible choices, but so have you. And both of us need to stop hurting innocent people to avoid facing our own problems. Margaret gestured for Derek to continue the conversation while she typed notes on her phone. Rebecca, the family is offering you a choice. You can participate in honest resolution of these issues, including counseling and structured communication about Derek's parentage. Or you can continue with blackmail and face criminal prosecution. Criminal prosecution. Rebecca's laugh sounded forced. You can't prosecute someone for knowing family secrets. Actually, we can prosecute someone for extortion, Margaret replied calmly. I've been documenting your blackmail attempts for 3 years. Phone records, bank transfers, recorded conversations, enough evidence for the district attorney to file charges. Derek looked around the room at his family, then back at the phone. Rebecca, I want to know you as my biological mother. But not if knowing you means enabling criminal behavior. Get help, stop the blackmail, and we can build an honest relationship. Continue down this path and you'll lose any chance of being part of your grandchild's life. Grandchild? Rebecca's voice shifted to surprise. Sarah's pregnant. Sarah stepped closer to the phone. Yes, I'm pregnant with Derek's child. And this baby will grow up understanding the difference between authentic family relationships and manipulative ones. Rebecca was quiet for several moments. When she spoke again, her voice carried a vulnerability that hadn't been present before. I've been angry for so long. Angry at Robert for destroying my marriage. Angry at Linda for getting to raise my son. Angry at the whole situation that stole my life. Anger is understandable, Derek replied. But using that anger to hurt other people for 30 years isn't justice. It's just more damage. Margaret looked at her watch. Rebecca, the construction fraud families will be here in 90 minutes. This is your opportunity to be part of healing instead of continued harm. What do you choose? The silence stretched long enough that we all wondered if Rebecca had hung up. Finally, her voice came through the speaker, smaller and more uncertain than before. If I stop the blackmail, if I agree to counseling, what happens to the money I've already received? That depends on whether you're willing to make restitution to the families who were actually harmed, Margaret replied. The money you received came from construction fraud. It belongs to the victims, not to you. Derek ended the call and looked around the conference room at the assembled faces. Well, that's one crisis handled. What's next? I checked my watch and realized we had transformed what should have been the most stressful day of my life into something approaching hope. Next, we get ready to face the family's dad cheated. Then we have an honest wedding ceremony. Then we start building the kind of family we actually want to be part of. Jessica kissed my cheek, her smile radiant with pride and love. Ready to get married, Brad? Readier, I replied. For the first time in my life, I'm ready for everything that comes next. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, our hotel conference room had been transformed into something resembling a restorative justice circle. The Patterson family sat across from my father, their weathered faces carrying 15 years of financial struggle and emotional trauma. Mrs. Henderson held photos of her flood-damaged basement, evidence of the faulty foundation work that had cost them $30,000 in repairs. Mr. Gonzalez brought medical records documenting his wife's asthma complications from mold exposure caused by the inadequate waterproofing in their home. Margaret facilitated the conversation with professional skill, ensuring that each family had the opportunity to describe how Dad's construction fraud had affected their lives. The stories were devastating in their quiet dignity: children who couldn't attend college because education savings went to house repairs, elderly grandparents who died from stress-related illnesses, marriages strained to the breaking point by financial pressure. Dad listened to each account without interruption, his composed businessman facade cracking with every testimony. When Mrs. Patterson described how her father-in-law's heart attack coincided with learning their house was structurally unsound, Dad broke down completely. I was young and desperate, he said through tears. Our business was struggling. We had medical bills from Linda's fertility treatments, and cutting corners seemed like a temporary solution to get back on track. Temporary solutions that lasted 15 years, Mr. Henderson replied without malice. Temporary solutions that became permanent damage to families who trusted you. Derek sat beside Dad, listening to the consequences of choices that had shaped his entire existence. I want to apologize too, he said quietly. Not for Dad's crimes, but for knowing about them and choosing to use that knowledge for personal gain instead of seeking justice for your families. Sarah reached over and squeezed Derek's hand, her gesture acknowledging his progress toward accountability. The transformation in Derek over the past 6 hours had been remarkable, from manipulative and defensive to genuinely remorseful and committed to change. Margaret presented each family with a detailed restitution plan that included immediate financial compensation, ongoing payments to cover accrued interest and emotional damages, and funding for independent inspections of their current homes. The money would come from liquidating assets purchased with fraudulent profits, including our family home dad's luxury vehicles and his remaining business interests. "This isn't charity," Margaret explained. "This is returning money that should never have been taken from you in the first place." Mrs. Gonzalez wiped tears from her eyes as she reviewed the compensation offer. "For 15 years, we thought we were crazy for believing something was wrong with our house. Everyone told us we were being too picky, too demanding. Having someone acknowledge that we were right all along, that means more than the money." The meeting concluded with handshakes and genuine expressions of forgiveness that seemed to surprise everyone involved. The families had come expecting confrontation and left with validation and justice. Dad had faced his victims directly and committed to making full restitution. Derek had begun the process of transforming from family secret into family healer. As the families departed, Rebecca arrived at the hotel looking older and more fragile than her voice had suggested during the phone conversation. She embraced Derek awkwardly, 28 years of separation and resentment, making physical affection complicated. "I brought these," she said, presenting a box of baby photos, birth certificates, and mementos from Derek's early childhood. "I've been carrying them around for 30 years, wanting to share them but not knowing how." Derek and Sarah examined the photos, together images of Derek as a toddler, drawings he had made in preschool report cards from elementary school that Rebecca had apparently treasured despite their estranged relationship. "Why didn't you ever try to contact me directly?" Derek asked. "Why blackmail and manipulation instead of honest communication?" Rebecca sat down heavily, her shoulders sagging with decades of accumulated guilt. "Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of the affair, ashamed of destroying Thomas's life. Ashamed of giving you up. Ashamed of everything that led to this situation. Shame doesn't justify hurting innocent people for 30 years, Margaret said gently but firmly. But shame can be the beginning of genuine change if you're willing to do the work." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I want to know my grandson when he's born. I want to be a real grandmother, not someone who shows up demanding money when she needs it." Derek looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Rebecca, you can be part of our child's life if you commit to getting counseling and ending the blackmail permanently. Our baby will grow up knowing about his complicated family history, but he'll only have relationships with people who choose honesty over manipulation." At 6 o'clock, our wedding ceremony began in the hotel's garden pavilion under Colorado's endless blue sky. Instead of traditional vows about loving and honoring each other, Jessica and I made commitments about building authentic relationships and breaking destructive family patterns. "I promise to support you in telling the truth even when it's difficult," Jessica said, her voice carrying across the assembled guests. "I promise to help you create the kind of family that faces problems together instead of hiding from them. I promise to choose courage over comfort," I replied, looking into her eyes while aware that our families and friends were witnessing something unprecedented. "I promise to build a life based on integrity rather than reputation, on genuine relationships rather than convenient lies." Margaret gave a reading about redemption and second chances that moved many guests to tears. She spoke about how exile had taught her that belonging based on truth was more valuable than belonging based on secrets, and that real family supports you in doing the right thing, especially when it's difficult. Derek served as my best man despite everything that had happened, his presence representing the possibility of transformation rather than the permanence of past mistakes. When he handed me the rings, he whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me when I had given up on myself." The reception evolved into something none of us had anticipated. Instead of typical wedding small talk, guests found themselves engaged in conversations about authenticity, accountability, and breaking cycles of family dysfunction. Several people shared their own stories of overcoming destructive patterns, creating connections that went far deeper than usual wedding interactions. Rebecca sat at a table with Sarah and Derek, looking through baby photos and discussing practical plans for co-parenting and grandparent involvement. Her transformation from blackmailer to potential grandmother wasn't complete. That would require months of counseling and consistent choices, but the foundation for honest relationship had been established. Dad spent the evening in conversation with Margaret and several guests who worked in construction, discussing his plans to rebuild his business on ethical foundations and continue making restitution to affected families. The road ahead would be difficult and expensive, but he seemed genuinely committed to earning redemption through consistent actions rather than empty promises. Mom, who had been quiet for most of the day, approached Jessica and me during the dancing portion of the reception. "I owe you both an apology," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've spent 30 years enabling lies because I was afraid of losing what I thought was security. I forgot that real security comes from relationships built on truth." "You haven't lost anything irreplaceable," Jessica replied, embracing Mom with genuine warmth. "You've just started building something authentic." As the evening wound down, Derek pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Brad, I know I have years of work ahead to earn forgiveness and rebuild trust. But I want you to know that seeing you choose courage over self-protection today, it inspired me to believe that change is actually possible." "Change is possible," I confirmed, "but only if you do the hard work consistently, even when nobody's watching, even when it's easier to go back to old patterns." Derek nodded seriously. "I'm starting gambling addiction counseling next week. Sarah and I are beginning couples therapy to learn how to co-parent effectively. And I'm working with Margaret to ensure all restitution payments are made on schedule." "What about your biological mother?" Derek glanced toward Rebecca, who was helping Sarah with wedding dress bustle complications. "We're taking it slow. Family therapy sessions to work through 30 years of dysfunction. It won't be easy, but our baby deserves grandparents who model healthy relationships." Jessica and I left for our honeymoon the next morning, not to some exotic destination, but to spend a week in Denver, working with Margaret and a legal team to ensure proper restitution for all construction fraud families. We had decided to begin our marriage not by escaping from problems, but by committing to solve them together. 6 months later, Derek had successfully completed residential gambling addiction treatment and was working as a project manager for a legitimate construction company while paying child support and making restitution for his thefts. Rebecca had moved to Denver to be closer to her grandson and was attending weekly therapy sessions to address the trauma and resentment that had driven her to blackmail. Dad had pled guilty to construction fraud charges and was serving 500 hours of community service while working to repay all affected families. His business had been liquidated, our family home sold, and our comfortable lifestyle dramatically reduced. But for the first time in 15 years, Dad seemed genuinely at peace. Mom had entered therapy to address the codependency and enabling behaviors that had allowed family dysfunction to persist. She was learning to build relationships based on honesty rather than fear, and developing friendships outside the narrow social circle that had prioritized reputation over integrity. Jessica and I celebrated our first anniversary at a small restaurant in downtown Denver, sitting across from Margaret and discussing our plans to expand the Restitution Foundation into a nonprofit organization helping other families affected by white-collar crime. Margaret had become our partner in the venture, her forensic accounting skills and personal experience providing credibility and expertise. Do you ever regret how your wedding day turned out? Margaret asked, as we reviewed foundation documents over dessert. Jessica and I looked at each other and smiled. It was the best wedding day imaginable, Jessica replied. Not because it was perfect, but because it was authentic. I raised my glass in a toast. To family dysfunction that gets healed instead of hidden. To secrets that lose their power when brought into the light. To the courage it takes to build something better. Margaret clinked her glass against ours. To second chances earned through consistent choices. To relationships based on truth rather than convenience. To breaking cycles that have damaged generations. As we walked back to our apartment that evening, Jessica took my hand and smiled. Ready for year 2 of marriage, Brad? Ready for whatever comes next, I replied. The good, the challenging, and everything in between. Looking back, I realized that the worst day of my life, the day my family's secrets exploded during my wedding, had become the foundation for the most authentic and fulfilling relationships I could imagine. We had learned that true strength comes not from protecting family secrets, but from having the courage to expose lies that hurt innocent people. Real love supports you in doing the right thing, especially when it's difficult. And family isn't about blood or loyalty to dysfunction. It's about people who encourage your integrity and share your commitment to growth. Derek's transformation hadn't been instant or complete, but it was genuine. Sarah had given birth to a healthy son who would grow up knowing his complicated family history while being surrounded by people committed to honesty and accountability. Rebecca had become a devoted grandmother who chose transparency over manipulation. And our parents had begun the long process of rebuilding their lives on foundations of truth rather than lies. The construction fraud families had received full restitution and public acknowledgement of the harm done to them. More importantly, they had received validation that their suffering mattered, and that justice, while delayed, was still possible. Jessica and I had built our marriage on principles that would sustain us through future challenges, choosing courage over comfort, facing problems together instead of creating new problems to avoid old ones, and committing to growth even when it was difficult. Our story had become proof that families can heal from even the most destructive dysfunction if enough people choose courage over convenience, truth over reputation, and authentic relationship over comfortable lies. The nonprofit foundation we created with Margaret had helped dozens of other families recover from white-collar crime and begin their own healing processes. We had learned that our family story wasn't unique. Many families struggle with secrets that poison relationships across generations. But we had also learned that healing is always possible when people choose accountability over defensiveness and commit to consistent positive action. As I write this, Derek is planning to propose to Sarah not as manipulation or strategy, but as a genuine commitment to building a life together based on honesty and mutual support. Rebecca sends birthday cards and holiday gifts without asking for money in return. Dad volunteers with Habitat for Humanity, using his construction skills to build homes properly. Mom has developed friendships with women who value authenticity over social status. And Jessica and I continue building our life together, one honest conversation at a time, one responsible choice at a time, one day at a time. We have learned that the strongest families are not those without problems, but those with the courage to face their problems honestly and the commitment to grow through whatever challenges arise. Our wedding day chaos had exposed every family secret, but it had also revealed something more important: the possibility of transformation through truth, the power of accountability to heal relationships, and the strength that comes from choosing integrity over comfort. Have you ever had to choose between protecting family secrets and seeking justice for people who were harmed? How do you handle situations where loyalty to family conflicts with doing the right thing? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building authentic relationships. Share this with anyone who might need encouragement that change is possible even in the most complicated family situations. Thank you for listening. And remember, courage to face the truth is the first step toward building the relationships you actually want to have.